Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a whole new episode of your program Windows, in which we're always keen to tackle the latest events that is happening here in Cairo and on the international arena. Of course, we've witnessed lots of visits, official visits by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, expanding more in the African Horn and getting more into different sectors as trade, as stability, as economy and security. We're going to speak more about this topic with my dear guest here in the studio, His Excellency Ambassador Hossam Eissa Qassem, former Assistant Foreign Minister to Sudan and South Sudan. Well, Your Excellency, it's a great honor and pleasure to have you.
The honor and the pleasure are mine. I am always ready and very happy to be here on your very successful and very popular show.
Thank you so much. Of course, we were speaking about the latest developments and movements by our government represented in His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, which was the recent one, was 13th of May, attending or having, yesterday actually, official visit with his Ugandan counterpart, Yoweri Museveni, tackling lots of topics and issues including security, stability, economy and lots more. So how do you see this very active, actually, visits by His Excellency towards the African continent and towards the African brotherly countries?
Those are very timely and successful visits. They came in the right time. Africa is having a lot of prospects and a lot of problems. The most important problem now is the distraction of attention of the whole world from Africa to other important crises like Middle East or Europe and Ukraine. But also the problems in Africa are no less important and are no less grave than those either in the Middle East or in Africa or in Asia or in Europe. We have a lot of problems that are affecting the stability, territorial integrity, the independence and the security of many African countries. Egypt has always been active in that regard. And its policy in Africa is really very principled and is based on certain principles which are very important for the continent. First, the importance of keeping the stability, territorial integrity and unity of African countries. Second, the importance of preserving the state institutions of African countries. Third, support for the armed forces, official armed forces of those African countries, which are the backbones of all the states in Africa or in everywhere. Also, Egypt is very keen on making the best use of its advantages in dealing with Africa, its relative advantage in dealing with Africa. For example, the most important is that geographical destination, the geographical location, cultural ties, common history, and many other ties that are binding us with Africa, the River Nile, the Red Sea, in addition to many other ties, in order to make the best use of that, the optimum use of that, to try to serve as much interests as possible, as well as try to create new interests and new projects, common projects in all fields, especially given the fact that the resources in Africa are very vast, but unfortunately are not being used in the most optimum way. That's why this week in particular and before has witnessed a lot of activities, especially from His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He has received, before going to Nairobi to attend the France-Africa summit, he has received the French president, and of course we all know that France is a very important power in Africa, and there is full coordination about the way to solve the African problems and how to deal with those problems, and how also to try to make some sort of collective effort in order to make the best use of the resources in Africa for the sake of African people. Then His Excellency President Sisi went to Nairobi and met with the Kenyan president in order to attend the summit also of France-Africa, which was very important, especially it comes in a very important time and a very timely way in Africa in particular, because as I told you, the distraction of attention from the world, from Africa in this very important juncture of its history. The summit was very successful. It affected and it emphasized the importance of the African continent and the stability of the African continent, the importance of the common cooperation between the continent countries and France and all other donor countries in order to make the best use of the resources of the continent. Then afterwards, His Excellency went to another very important Nile country and African country, Uganda, and met with His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni in order to follow up the common projects of between Egypt and Uganda in all fields, whether education, whether development, whether investment. And this is also very important because we are creating interests and we are creating common interests among African countries, which are the main important affecting factor in those countries when they are trying to draw their policies or make their strategies. In that regard, contacts on all levels are continuing with African countries. There was a phone call between His Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Badr Abdel Ati, and His Excellency Abdel Salam Abdi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Somalia, in which Dr. Badr Abdel Ati has confirmed the Egyptian position about the territorial integrity and the stability and the unity of Somalia. Especially this is something that is jeopardized now by many schemes, either from the continent or outside the conference, against that territorial integrity. We have seen the recognition, for example, of the State of Israel of Somaliland, which is a secessionist entity from Somalia 30 years ago. It hasn't been recognized by any country except for Israel and Ethiopia, unfortunately. But Egypt is, of course, condemning that, and the whole world is condemning that, because that is totally violating international law. The territorial integrity of the member states of the United Nations and of independent countries should be respected by everybody, and secessionist governments shouldn't be abetted or helped in their efforts to destabilize the original country. So Egypt also is playing a very important role in that, and also there are many challenges now which are facing many African countries, which we can talk about in details in this episode. For example, Mali, Congo, Sudan, and many other countries which are facing very important and dangerous and grave developments, unfortunately not given much attention by the world now, which is distracted by other problems that are affecting economically and strategically other countries of the world.
Well, Your Excellency, of course, we've seen this activities by His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, as you said, reflects a great broader Egyptian strategy built around different pillars, which is stability, regional stability, economy, diplomacy, and restoring also Egypt's role as a central political actor in the African Horn or in the African continent.
Yes, and I think the speech given by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Nairobi is a very important message in that regard, and it really expresses very precisely the Egyptian policy in that regard, and it had very practical steps in order to fulfill this strategy and those objectives. For example, exchanging the debts of African countries by investment projects inside those African countries, which would be of dual importance and dual use for both the debtors and the creditors. In addition, also giving much more importance and finance to the green projects, which are conducive to a better environment in Africa and the whole world consequently. In addition, also to much more access and easier access of African countries to finances, which would have very good results and very positive results in the form of important successful projects that make the best use of the resources and of the opportunities up till now not exploited or not used in the most optimum way.
Well, of course, His Excellency just launched this initiative actually yesterday, and it was it was a great step on behalf of him, let's say, because we did talk about that before, that the UN Security Council right now is witnessing or discussing lots of issues also when it comes to Sudan and South Sudan, when it comes to the security, when it comes to integrity, also when it comes to food and the famine that some countries are suffering from.
Yes.
Those sessions also witnessed the help of the World Monetary Fund, speaking about those countries who suffers and how this can help. Well, that's why we need to help this initiative by His Excellency. We're doing this alone with no world or international institutions, which I think this will gain lots of prosperity, not just in the African Horn, but also with the countries that is dealing with those countries.
I fully agree, because much of, or one of the most important reasons behind all the problems you are facing now in Africa, we are having problems either in Sudan or Mali or Congo or Somalia or Nigeria. One of the most important reasons behind that is the stagnation of the development process. It needs all the help and expertise and the finances of the whole world in order to make the best use of the African resources, which would be a win-win situation for the donors as well as for those countries who are receiving those investments and help. I think this is the only substitute for what we are witnessing now in some African countries: civil wars, massacres, violation of human rights. Because if the people could find their way in a development process that can guarantee their essentials and can see the future for their sons and their siblings, I'm sure that they would have a better attitude and a different attitude. This is not the case in many African countries because of some mistakes on the part of those countries, and also because mainly of the negligence of the major powers in the world, which are distracted from Africa. That's why Egypt, by its movements and by its activity in Africa, which is very important strategically for Egypt, and is trying to bridge that gap and to bring back that very important content to the attention of the world major powers. France was an example in that, and all other powers also are giving the same information and giving the same attitude of Egypt in that regard.
Let's say that this movements or this period of time where we see lots of flourishing actually moments when it comes to our foreign policy, expanding more, not just in the African Horn, but speaking about African continent, I think this also what Egypt wants is the stronger political influence inside Africa after lots of international powers or powerful countries try to expand more in the African continent and in some African countries. So I think the timing is so important, not just about opening new bases or channels for trade, but also investing in Africa, the infrastructure and all of that. Egypt already did some projects that I think one of them was the biggest medical center in Africa. So I think we are just not walking on a steady steps, that's it, but also positioning the whole process when it comes to economy, stability, security, even water security. We're going to speak about that also.
Yes, for example, Egypt has built the Julius Nyerere Dam in Tanzania in order to help in that regard. Of course, this is a very important country and it's a neurotic country, and Egypt gave its expertise and finances and help to our Tanzanian brothers in order to build one of the biggest water projects in the continent, which would help the Tanzanians either in electricity projects as well as in water and irrigation and agriculture. This is an example of many other examples that are taking place with South Sudan, with Somalia, with Chad and all other African countries in that regard, in which Egypt is trying to make the best use of its expertise and try to help also financially in establishing projects that would be conducive to a better standard of living for African brothers. This is the main field of cooperation, and this is the principle in which I think all major powers should help in fulfilling, and this is to my mind one of the main important reasons or one of the main important factors that would lead to stability and that would help Africa prevent civil wars, massacres, violations of human rights. People want their essentials. People want a future, better future. People want development, want better services, want education and better health care. And this is what Egypt is doing through its different bodies which are specialized in that regard. But unfortunately, this is not the case with other major powers. For example, we have seen what happened with the present American administration, which has closed down one of the most important institutions of aid, of American aid, the U.S. aid, which is badly needed, especially in a country like in a continent like Africa. But unfortunately, in spite of that, it has been closed down, and all its employees have been laid off in a time in which it is badly needed. For example, another important organization like UNRWA, for example, in Palestine, which is being combated and being fought by many major powers because of its humanitarian as well as development efforts for the Palestinians. And we need help, we need assistance, we need development, we need cooperation among all developing countries, especially in African countries, which have been now neglected for a long time, especially with all those other wars that are taking place in the world, whether in Europe or in the Middle East or Asia, and Africa is paying the price of that negligence. I hope we can change our attitude as a world, because we are in one boat, as I say, and it has been proved now that nobody is immune, and whatever happens in any part of the world is affecting all other parts of the world. You see what happened, for example, with the closure down of Hormuz Straits, which affected the economy in all the world. Africa is no less important, and it is really controlling many of the waterways of global trade, in addition to many other sources and minerals which are very important to the whole world. I'm sure that more attention to African conflicts and to the development in African countries and their needs would pay off a lot and would lead to a much better a situation in those countries, and to avoid other disasters which to be added to the many conflicts and disasters that the world are witnessing now.
Well, I totally agree, Your Excellency, because also His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi addressed that while his visit taking place, and he said that again, a stable region will lead to a stable economy, which is going to flourish the whole continent, I was speaking. Also something else that speaking about the projects, not just that, but also His Excellency, again, not just condemning whatever's happening when it comes to conflicts and in different part of the African countries, let's say, and the sovereignty and watching its sovereignty and its integrity, and speaking about Egypt will always support. So Egypt is not just, again, recentering itself in the African Horn or in the whole world, but again, it's redrawing a new map, which I think when those countries are getting more busy with the investments and developing, we will I'm sure we're going to end the wars soon. They have human resources, they have natural resources, they have lots of resources, and Egypt again affirmed that Egypt is the gateway of the African continent.
Yes, and we have, this is the only substitute for civil wars and massacres and all violations of human rights. Development, and we have many examples either in the African continent or outside it. For example, Rwanda, which had witnessed 30 years ago one of the most mass slaughters in the history of humankind. Now Rwanda is on the verge or on a very successful way and developing on very quickly and very fast, and they have surpassed all those atrocities and tragedies of the past, and it's a shining example that we can overcome all the problems if we are bent on developing our country, and if we are bent on serving our people, and if we are bent on really ameliorating and developing our economy. This is what happened in Rwanda, and it can happen in all other African countries which are facing now the same problems that Rwanda faced 30 years ago, whether civil wars or massacres or violation of human rights. And this is very important, another important aspect of Egyptian policy in the region. Egypt has always been very firm in denouncing any violation of human rights, any attempt to infringe on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of African countries. Egypt was very firm in condemning the recognition, for example, of Somaliland by both Ethiopia and Israel. Egypt has been, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry have issued a very firm also statement on the 5th of May against the attacks against Khartoum civilian airport that took place by the militia on that date, and it was unfortunately a drone coming from neighboring Ethiopia, and it's a militia drone that has come from neighboring Ethiopia, and Egypt has denounced it in a very firm way. Egypt has also denounced before the massacres that took place at Al Fashir in Sudan, and all the violations of human rights and rape cases and mass killings that took place there. Those are very important aspects of Egyptian foreign policy, and it's a very stable aspect of it, and it's a firm principle of Egypt in that regard. States should be preserved. Territorial integrity of the states is very sacred, and it's a very important aspect of the international law, and also the unity of the countries and the state institutions are very important backbone in order to preserve those countries and prevent turning them or changing them into more failed states like the ones we are witnessing now.
So can we say that Egypt is shifting from reactive diplomacy to strategic African engagement?
Egypt has always been one of the countries that has a very clear strategy based on certain principles in whether in Africa or the Middle East or all other important circles of importance to Egyptian foreign policy. We have been very firm in denouncing all efforts by any country in order to destabilize any other country, especially our African sisterly countries or Arab sisterly countries. We have been very firm in preserving the state institutions, which are the backbone of any country. We have been also very serious and clear in our efforts to have cooperation with all other important African or Arab countries or countries of the world in order to try to find or create a win-win situation to make the best use of all the sources and of all the advantages of each country in a cooperation in order to make the optimum use of the resources and also to prevent wars and conflicts. Egypt has been bent on that important policy since it has even started its peace initiative with Israel in the 70s up till now. And it has been the same policy in all other important conflicts that has taken place either in Africa or in the Middle East. Egypt has been very clear in that regard. Peace, stability, territorial integrity, common cooperation are the only aspects for a better future and the only substitute either for civil wars or wars among different countries, in which nobody is winning.
Yes, but we're speaking about more of course, we've seen lots of militias that are being provoked in different borders when it comes to African countries. We're going to speak about that and how our diplomacy and how our state is so concerned when it comes to the security and also the Nile Basin security. So can we speak about those and what are the consequences?
This is what we call the dominion theory, in which one failed state is affecting all its neighbors and also the other countries of the region. We have Somaliland and Puntland secessionist governments or secessionist entities in Somalia since 30 years ago. We have now a parallel government in Sudan headed by a militia and also another president, a so-called president in Darfur. We have two governments, the legitimate government in Port Sudan and the illegitimate one which is not recognized by the world in Nile, Darfur. We have also two governments in Libya, for example, in Benghazi and Tripoli. And now we have a militia and the 23rd of February militia in Congo, which has signed a peace accord in Washington a few weeks ago, but unfortunately they have violated all the texts of that peace accord. We have also another important development and grave development in Mali, which witnessed almost a failed attempt of a coup d'etat against its president and the killing of its defense minister by the rebels of Azado, the also secessionist and allied with certain branches of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Mali. And also we have the problems of Boko Haram in Nigeria, and all the Sahel countries are witnessing this security vacuum and witnessing all those internal conflicts, which are not only limited to their borders, but also affecting all their neighbors as well. This is a lesson we have learned from either the conflicts in the Middle East or in Africa, that the political borders never are not limiting political instability. Usually they cross those borders to neighboring countries. Nobody can be safe while their neighbors are unsecure, and nobody can have a development process while their neighbors are starving. This is a lesson we have learned. That's why we have always been very active, either in the Middle East or in the African continent, trying to help settle those conflicts, trying to help as much as possible, either humanitarian assistance or education or training or development assistance or common projects or investment. This is very important, or settling the problems, because if not, it is stretching and extending to different countries of the continent. And here what we are witnessing now. This is what we call the domino theory, in which you cannot be immune, or nobody can be immune, while its surroundings are on fire and are having instability and lack of development, and all the violations we are witnessing now, and all the conflicts, and which are unfortunately expanding now.
Yeah, that's why I think right now, let's say that the whole world are a little bit focusing towards the African conflicts and the issues, and lots of topics when it comes to any conference or summit. Top to the agenda, again, security and regional stability and all of that. Now, as you said, nobody is immune. We've witnessed lots of obstacles that faced lots of countries according to not just the conflicts, but also when it comes to economy and lots of consequences of the conflicts. How do you see this lately, this flourishing when it comes to tackling more and more issues when it comes to the African Horn or the African continent? There is a division, let's say. There is the good part, and there's lots of countries also had conflicts with African countries. So this is getting even worse, I guess. So this inner conflicts can also not just reflect on them, but also again in regionally and I think the whole continent, right?
Yes, the real problem is that the conflicts in other parts of the world are not only distracting the attention from Africa, but they are extended inside Africa. For example, in Mali. And Mali has always been one of the most important spheres of influence of France, for example. And they had military cooperation with France, but because of the conflict between Europe now on one hand and Russia, they have substituted Russian forces with French forces, and that led, of course, to some sort of vacuum, which led to the problems and dangers that Mali is witnessing now. Somaliland and the recognition of Somaliland by Israel, of course, is another important repercussion of the conflict in the Middle East, in which that country wants to be in control of all the strategic important locations that are surrounding the Middle East, and especially the waterways. And Somalia, of course, Somalia is one of the most strategically important country. It is overlooking either the Indian Ocean or the Red Sea, and all other countries also, all the external forces that are playing in Sudan or Nigeria and all other countries, which are leading to the conflict. So not only the world is not helping enough, but unfortunately they are contributing to making the conflicts graver, and they are moving their conflicts inside the continent. That's what Egypt has been fighting. The Egyptian policy in that regard is very clear, that no interference in the internal affairs of African countries, no denouncing and trying to undermine any attempts to increase instability or to cause instability in those countries because of its effect not only on that country but on its regional as well as continental effect.
Well, Your Excellency, also you mentioned the foreign diplomacy that we are witnessing. Also, again, it's flourishing lots more. We've seen Dr. Badr Abdelati also visiting lots of counterparts, lots of phone calls, as you mentioned before. So I think the whole government or the whole state are contributing to contain the obstacles, and meanwhile also to through some maybe suggestions when it comes to the talks or
Yes.
on the sideline of whatever summit. We've seen His Excellency also Prime Minister attending the coronation of the Djibouti president, which also again reflects the strongly brotherly connected relations between, or the bilateral relation between Egypt and other countries.
Of course.
So
Egypt has always respected the choice of African peoples, of their leaders. We have never tried to interfere to impose this or that government or this or that strategy or ideology on that country. We have always been dealing with the legitimate governments of our African sisterly countries. We have never supported any militias or secessionist movements or secessionist entities inside our African continent or in the Middle East, because we think this is some sort of a principle, and we think that the security as well as the stability and development is something collective. It is not only limited behind the borders of one country, but usually it extends to all its neighborhoods, and nobody, as I told you, is immune. Everybody is affected by what's happening in the country. And everybody, also many countries have been affected by what's happening between Ukraine and Russia. And also in all other hotspots of the world are affecting not only their region now, but also they are affecting the whole world as well. The world now is very narrow, and it is very interconnected, that we cannot separate what happens in one country or one continent from what its effect on the other countries of the world. This, what we are talking about, is a global effect, but imagine what happens if it is inside our continent. Africa is very important strategically for us. We are trying to help our African countries. We are trying to face the challenges that are posed by some either continental forces or some other outside forces that are threatening the stability and the unity and the territorial integrity and the development of those countries.
Well, of course, we hope that they speak more about Africa and the African continent, because I think this is not just containing or just saving people. They have very devastated also humanitarian consequences and circumstances that we are witnessing. So I think that the world now is moving towards that. We are trying on our behalf when it comes to Egypt and our presidency and our state. And of course, we have all the confidence in His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, trying to contain and trying to actually he's tangling everything together: Africa, trade, economy, investment, the region, stability, security. So I think all of those are entwining together, let's say, for a better cause.
Of course, this is very important, and as I told you before, if at least you cannot help in development, don't try to aggravate the problems. This is what Egypt has always been telling to major world powers, as well as African countries and regional powers, in order to help in that regard, because as I told you, nobody is immune, and if somebody is trying to destabilize his neighbor, be sure that this will, the negative effect will be extended inside his own territories. This is, it's either win-win situation or lose-lose situation. I hope other countries, whether in the region or the continent or the world, we are going also to help in that regard. We have full coordination, and we have met His Excellency President el-Sisi have met with President Macron of France, whether in Nairobi or in Cairo, and France is a very major power in that regard. This is also the main essence of all our contacts with other major powers, whether inside the continent or outside. We hope that those powers who are not understanding this very important wisdom, are coming or are changing their attitudes, because I think nobody, as I told you, is immune, and the conflicts can affect everybody, whether far or near to the geographical location of that conflict. We have some pariah or rogue states, either in the Middle East or in Africa itself or outside, that are trying to destabilize African countries. We are helping in facing them and trying to be a force of positive force in that regard, especially after all what we have learned through the lessons of history and all the failed states and all the crises that befell the region, whether in the Middle East or East Africa or different parts of Africa.
Well, Your Excellency, of course, we need to thank our state and represented in His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi for the pragmatic,
Yes.
steady moves that he's now taking and still will be taking actually. Now, right now, Egypt is positioning itself not just only in the international arena, not just on the African continent, in Asia, Europe, and all over the world. We are the heart of the world right now. The stability of the region means the support of Egypt, and the stability of Egypt means the stability of the whole region and the Middle East.
I'm really talking very objectively and impartially in that regard. It is the Egyptian position that has been proved correct in all the problems either of Africa or the problems of the Middle East. For example, in Sudan, Egyptian position has been very clear that supporting the state institutions should be a must in order to help save the civilians and help the Sudanese citizens. And we have seen the massacres and the atrocities that took place on the part of the militias against those citizens, and how they feel protected now by the army when they have recaptured or liberated Khartoum and the main cities in Sudan, and also in other countries, whether in Mali or Somalia or Congo. We have been also a force of stability in that regard. We have warned all other countries that are violating the international law and trying to be a force of destabilization, that this effect or the negative effect of that destabilization will not spare them, and they will be affected themselves. We have many examples of this. Israel, for example, in the Middle East, or Ethiopia in Eastern Africa, and its destabilizing effect in Sudan. A drone from Ethiopia has bombed the Sudanese or the Khartoum airport on the 5th of May, in addition to establishing 10 training camps for the militia in Bahr Dar in Ethiopia, and their, of course, recognition of Somaliland, and their bad policies and violations against the rights of Egypt and Sudan concerning the Nile waters, which are violating all principles of international law. This is also what's happening with Israel and some other countries. We are facing that by diplomacy, by wisdom, by all sorts and means, in order to help change that attitude, which will affect negatively not only the countries they are targeting, but the aggressors themselves.
Well, Your Excellency, we hope for the best, not just for the region, not just for the Middle East, but for the whole world. Your Excellency, Ambassador Hossam Eissa Qassem, former Assistant Foreign Minister to Sudan and South Sudan. That was my pleasure. That was so informative. I had all the pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for being with me.
The pleasure is always mine to come to this very respectable channel, and I'm at your disposal at any time, especially because the developments that are taking place now very fast, either in the African continent or the Nile Basin area, are very important and needs much more encounters in order to help shed light on those very important developments and its effect on Egypt.
Thank you so much. We hope for the best. Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we came to the end of this episode. Promise we'll be back next week with more diverse topics. Until then, best regards from me, Shuruf Bakir.